Hey everyone, welcome back to this week's episode of From the Desk of Ana Paulina Luna. This week, things are definitely heating up starting at the White House as they continue to use Hispanic immigrants as political tools, thanks to Peter Doocy for calling them out. We'll get into what's happening in the Pacific with China, Taiwan, and Nancy Pelosi's visit, and also to be getting into how Jon Stewart is gaslighting Americans into thinking Republicans don't care about veterans. As we continue, we'll be, of course, addressing our Florida Man of the Week and at a Walmart nonetheless, and then, of course, answering questions from all of you. This is From the Desk of Ana Paulina Luna. My name's Ana Paulina Luna. I'm pro-life, pro-God, pro-gun, and anti-globalist. So as you know, the White House and the Biden administration has largely based their platform, especially with Hispanic Americans, which I remind you, their ratings are now in the tank with, but largely campaigned in 2020 based on an open border agenda. Of course, now they're starting to see the direct impacts of mass illegal immigration, starting with the fact that many Republican governors said, hey, we're not going to allow these people to come to our states, our cities, so if you guys want to allow them in, we're going to ship them right to Washington, D.C., so they're right in your backyard. Of course, now the mayor of D.C. doesn't like what's currently happening. In fact, Mayor Muriel Bowser actually asked for the National Guard to help with the amount of large illegals that are coming into Washington, D.C. Now, to be clear, I think if people are coming here, they shouldn't be shipped to D.C. They should be shipped right back out of the country, mainly because they're unvetted, unchecked, and a lot of these people are coming into the United States with diseases that we previously thought were eradicated. Now, check out this clip where Peter Doocy brings it right to the White House.
D.C. mayor sent the White House a letter asking for National Guard help with migrants that have been bused here from Texas and Arizona. Is the president going to approve that request for the National Guard?
So, as to your question on the National Guard, I refer you to the Department of Defense. They will have that answer for you. We have been in regular touch with Mayor Bowser and her team. And I said this before. I said this last week about Republicans using migrants as a political tool, and that is shameful, and that is just wrong. Again, so what Republicans are doing, the way that they're meddling in the process and using migrants as a political pawn is just wrong.
So the White House's preference would be for small towns in Texas and Arizona to have to take care of these migrants rather than a large metropolitan city.
That is not what I said.
That is not what I said.
So what's extremely alarming about this, and when you see Peter Doocy call them out, you see how the White House, obviously they're looking for clips. Obviously, they know a lot of Americans are genuinely concerned about this. But the fact that they are now trying to say that it's Republicans that are using these migrants as political tools is completely wrong. Remember, it was Obama that put kids in cages, right? It was actually the Obama-Biden administration that was actually known for being the deporter-in-chiefs. And now you're seeing the media, mind you, the same media that called Republicans and President Trump racist and xenophobic for wanting border security, for wanting to build a wall. They're the exact same people that are now being quiet at the fact that the Biden administration is now actually continuing to secure certain sections of the southern border by putting up a physical wall, a physical barrier, and yet there's this gross double standard that exists. I actually want to address something. Earlier during this administration, you actually had the Biden administration that were putting kids literally in Connex boxes. And when we actually put up that information out for the public to see, because of course they were trying to say that it was President Trump that was putting these kids in cages, they actually largely had their fact checkers attack many conservative outlets, to include my own, for putting out false information, although we were literally showing these facilities that they were putting kids in. So as you can see, there's a gross double standard that exists. We'll continue to shed light on that, especially with this show. But it's important to note that when they're saying that Republicans are the reason why this is happening and they're trying to blame it on us, that's actually a gross misrepresentation. The fact is there would not be this problem if this administration did not campaign on open borders. And frankly, the only solution for everyone, not just the people that are coming here likely being trafficked illegally, but also to people waiting in line, is to have a zero tolerance stance on illegal immigration. And frankly, that's not humanitarian. It's the right thing to do. But again, we're continuously seeing, as as we see this spike in illegal immigration, we're seeing also a rise in crime. And in addition to that, let's talk about the fact that in places like New York, I don't know if you saw the headline recently, crime rates have actually gone up in so many of these cities that they're now locking up spam containers, which is something that I never thought I'd see happen in my time. But as you can see with this impact, there's significantly less resources for Americans that are largely struggling due to the economy, due to what's happening with gas prices. And now it seems that we are actually on the verge of another war, which obviously we're not advocates for the military industrial complex on this show, but the same people that are serving in our wars overseas, they're not actually getting the treatment that they deserve when they're getting out of the military. As you guys know, I did serve in the military. I was in for 6 years. And with what we're seeing now with current medical records and veterans speaking out, there's a huge issue with the burn pits, right? As you know, during Vietnam War, they had something called Agent Orange, which is actually a known carcinogen. And now Vietnam veterans are actually largely struggling with cancer due to that exposure. In fact, there's so many veterans that are still not getting the benefits that they deserve because of all the bureaucracy within the VA system. But to refocus it on what's happening with the burn pits, that is going to be my generation of veteran, our version of Agent Orange, right? And so there was this massive spending bill that they were actually putting forward in Congress. It passed in Congress and then it went to Senate. And there were many senators that actually voted against it. It was a $400 billion spending bill. But what they noticed is that although the Democrats were pushing this bill saying that it was for veterans, when you actually dissected the bill further, it turned out that there was massive amounts of funding in there that they were using veterans for to get the funding for, but it wasn't actually going to the vets. And so it was basically for Democrat pet projects. And instead of really focusing it on the veterans like it should have been, it was actually going to other causes. And so I frankly saw this, and at a first glance, the Democrats were basically using this and using the media largely to attack Republicans for saying, hey, look, we support veterans, but we're not going to support this massive spending bill. And so I think it's incredibly important for Republican legislators that if they are going to vote against this bill, that they absolutely should be proposing one that's largely focusing on the veterans. I mean, the fact is that Republicans obviously care about veterans, but more importantly, I mean, the same people that are voting to send men and women to war are not taking care of them after the fact. And if you're going to propose a bill for veterans, then let it be just for veterans. Stop using veterans as a political tool to put all of this garbage that's not necessary in these bills instead of actually focus and allocating the funding directly to the cause that you're saying it's supposed to be for. That is my biggest pet peeve that I have with Congress and some of these bills, is that they will say it's for one thing and then you actually take a look at the bill and it's for another thing that they basically hide unrelated spending and massive amounts of obviously funding for that we just simply don't need. So as Senator Pat Toomey said in a statement, he said that by failing to remove this gimmick, Congress would effectively be using an important veterans care bill to hide a massive unrelated spending binge. And so by him actually doing this, I think that, he's using his megaphone to obviously talk about these issues and address them. But of course, Democrats are going to paint us like we're crazy.
Over the line. No. Because these people have suffered for 15 years. Because you're a fucking
look at them in the
troll.
Look at them in
You're
the
a
face.
troll.
I want the bill
You're
passed.
not in good faith.
I'm for the bill.
You're not in good faith.
So what's the problem? What are
My
you trying to
question,
do here?
my question
What is
is,
your question?
What are you trying to do here?
What?
why is John? I'm not even against you guys.
What are you
Then why
trying to
the
do
fuck
Then
here?
what are you doing? Then what are you?
So Jon Stewart did this really intense video. It was actually on C-SPAN when I saw it, where he's basically yelling about how evil Republicans are and that they don't give a, SHIT, whatever it is. He's basically going off, but he's not actually telling you what's in the bill. And whether or not he knew it, frankly, it's really important that all people are reading what's actually in these bills. But speaking of military and what's happening with our veterans, it's important to note that I've said this, I think I said this basically in our first and second episode, but I do believe that we are in a very serious time and possibly on the brink of something kinetic when it comes to China. So as you know, Nancy Pelosi recently flew to Taiwan a few days ago. And of course, the minute that she did that, not only did we see China release this very aggressive military video, which I can say rivals ours right now. We have the entire Army and the Navy putting out, sensitivity training videos, while China's literally putting out videos that I would say are sending a message to the United States. And frankly, remember this, the Chinese government, Xi Jinping, they did not want to mess with President Trump because they knew that President Trump walked with a big stick. And what we're finding is after the Chinese government witnessed the withdrawal, the gross withdrawal, mind you, of Afghanistan, obviously you saw the leadership with General Milley, who, mind you, is a very bad guy, who actually was calling the Chinese government, communist Chinese government, after January 6th to talk about the Trump administration. Of course, the Chinese government is not going to respect the United States of America. Also, mind you, Hunter Biden, I believe, is a national security threat, and there is mass interesting stuff there that I think would compromise any administration. But the fact is that they know that they can get away with a lot more with this administration than they would be able to under President Trump. Anyways, check out this Chinese military hype video that they released. This video was actually released, mind you, shortly before Nancy Pelosi became one of the highest ranking members of the US government to visit Taiwan in over 25 years. As we know right now, right after we left Afghanistan, the Chinese government went in and actually helped the Taliban and the Afghan government actually stand up and is now going in to help them, I believe. And what, Andy and I have mentioned many a times is to actually help harvest these natural resources. But really what it is it's about expanding the footprint globally of the Chinese government. And as we're seeing, I actually saw something that was posted, and I'll put it below, by Carrie Dot, who is actually a former member of the Canadian Conservative Parliament Party. But it talks about how there is going to be an effort for the Chinese government to be a world superpower by 2030, and how projected in regards to our stance economically, and then also to on a global import-export perspective, they're actually on track. So when they're releasing these types of videos at the same time that the United States is perceived at the weakest it's ever been in a global perspective in a long time, that to me is very, very serious. And I think any person who's a strategist, a military strategist nonetheless, would look at this saying that, look, the Chinese government, while we are basically focusing on this gender identity, sensitivity training, instead of focusing on preparing our next generation of warfighters and equipping them with what they need to include, having a strong sense of love and patriotism for this country. The Chinese military is doing that for their people. And mind you, they are literally beating us currently in the tech industry as well. So this is something that is going to, I believe, continue to heat up. And obviously, I'm not an advocate for war, but this is definitely very scary, especially being that China is pushing massive global communism. In a national and international perspective, not only are they really hitting our country, right, with massive amounts of cyber warfare and disinformation so that we are fighting amongst each other, they've infiltrated our governments, our corporations, they've infiltrated our education system, and really, I believe, dumbed down this country. In the meanwhile, they've actually been working all along in our backyard in South America. They've been working in Africa, obviously in the Middle East, while we've been playing and literally spilling blood as the global police force, which we should have never done. We should just be focusing on issues here at home. But while we've been doing that, they've actually been going in and economically harvesting these countries. The only way out of this, right? Like, let's talk about solutions. The only way out of this would be to incentivize American manufacturing, at least out of China, into countries that are pro-America, pro-Western ideology. And then also to, I would argue, to cut and to economically hinder or actually wage an economic war with China so that they are not, well, they do own a majority of the United States from an economic perspective, but prevent them from buying land here in the United States, prevent them from being given passes on tariffs. I think that China right now is basically gearing up to come to the United States. And ironically enough, if you guys have time, there was a really interesting thing. I don't know if you're into the spiritual aspect, but George Washington's vision for America, if we can maybe do something on that next week, I will for you guys, but definitely check it out. It's definitely interesting. He talks about at the end his last vision for America, and he sees a plume of red smoke. Some say that that's communism. So we'll see where that leads. Okay, so on to our Florida Man of the Week. Our Florida Man of the Week, of course, and something to do with, it's either always at a Publix or a Walmart, right? I digress. Florida Man of the Week was arrested Sunday after he allegedly drove a motorized scooter and crashed it into the shelves of a Walmart store while drunk in Melbourne City, which is southeast of Orlando. The 39-year-old was driving a Walmart scooter with his open backpack sitting in the basket, of which was an open bottle of Smirnoff vodka, was spotted. So I guess that's not a DUI, it's a SUI. He's a Russian asset. He had vodka. At least that's how the Rasmussen report will put it, right?
Maybe he was
kidding.
part of the Uhuru.
Yeah, maybe he was part of the Uhuru movement that was actually busted recently in St. Petersburg, Florida, for working with Russia to fix elections. Ironically, how that is, they are literally a self-proclaimed socialist group, and they were actually working with Russia, but you won't hear that because they weren't Republicans, right? It's supposed to be Republicans that are Russia, Russia, Russia. It's a hoax. Anyways, the driver of the scooter in question was found to be unresponsive when asked to show his ID and had to be carried to a patrol vehicle in a stretcher. Later, the scooter driver refused a breathalyzer test when in custody. I didn't know that you could get breathalyzed if you're driving a scooter under the influence. Is that considered a motor vehicle? It's not registered. We have so many questions.
You can run someone over with it.
Let's not do that. He was later on locked up in Brevard County Jail on charges of driving under the influence, a DUI, so I guess you can get a DUI, disorderly intoxication, refusal with prior citation, and possession of an open container. So I know none of you would obviously be crazy enough to do this, but apparently in the state of Florida, you can get a DUI while driving a scooter, which I wonder if now that brings me to my next question. You know how you always see those bird scooters all over different parts of, cities in Florida. You see them definitely in DC. Apparently you can't drive those if you're drinking. So obviously be safe, guys. There's Ubers. There's, what's the other? Lyft. There's definitely so many different app companies you can use today. You don't have to get in trouble and drink and drive. Don't do it, guys. But not our proudest Florida man of this week, but this is definitely interesting nonetheless. All right, so back to our questions from all of you. As we continue to move into the midterms, obviously we had some exciting races, and Trump's endorsement is literally, I think, what's the number at right now for how many he's actually won?
He's only lost a couple.
He's like one
of the main reasons is because he endorsed so late.
Oh, no, Trump's win record, if you are a candidate for office, it is literally, everything.
Well over 90%.
Yeah, well over 90%. Literally, President Trump has the good gold touch. Whatever he touches, it's an automatic winner, as he says. Okay, so for questions for you guys. So earlier this past week, I had a question from a young woman on social media who asked me about my experience in the military. So I did join when I was 19 years old, and I always tell people, regardless of, what you have going on in your life, the military, I think, is a net positive. So if you are under the age of 37, because I believe recently they actually raised the enlistment age up, I recommend that you consider joining. If I would have look back at it, I know that they have options to join the Guard and the Reserve if you don't want to leave home. I did active duty first, and then I transitioned to the Guard. Both are great options, but if you're looking to stay more home, definitely do the Guard. I think another question I had recently is, how do you make your vote count a second time around? So there's an organization called Second Vote, and as you know, there's been this massive push with different corporations, different brands pushing these political causes, but I always tell people, it works both ways. If you have a company, for example, that you know doesn't support your ideologies, then why give them money? Because they're just going to turn around and use that to basically fund whatever movements they want to give to, right? So there's an actual website and a social media page called secondvote.com. I highly encourage you guys to go there. You can see what brands are more conservative leaning, whether it's grocery stores, whether it's makeup companies, whether it's clothing brands. So definitely check them out. Make your voice count. So a lot of people have asked me, and this is just something that I do personally, how do I organize my time? So I actually don't keep social media on my personal app and device, and I don't do that for a few reasons. One, as we know, Facebook, TikTok especially, you know, all these different apps that can actually gather your private data. I don't want to have them on my phone. And also too, it's actually helped me. There's a good documentary, you should all watch it. It's called The Social Dilemma, but it's actually better, healthier for you to not have social media on your phone because one, you won't be on it all the time when you're around friends and family. And then also two, the way that some of these apps have been engineered is they're actually engineered to get you addicted to using them. So you know how they call it TikTok brain when you go on and then all of a sudden 5 hours later, you're still on TikTok and you're wondering why? That's exactly why. They are engineered to get your dopamine receptors fired up and squirting that dopamine squirt every time you're on there. So make sure that you guys are separating them. That's my kind of life tip of the week in regards to how I run my social media platforms. And as you guys know, I think across all my platforms, I have close to about 1 million people that I interact with, but definitely don't prioritize social media over normal life because there is life outside of the black screen. So thank you so much for tuning back into this week's episode of From the Desk of Ana Paulina Luna. Please make sure that you are liking and subscribing, also commenting on our stuff. If you have questions, make sure you guys submit them next week to @RealAnaPaulina. And of course, if you see a Florida man or woman in action, make sure you guys are tagging us, recording it, and sending it in so that we can feature it on next week's episode of From the Desk of Ana Paulina Luna.